This is Jim Cornette, wrestling legend and all-around nice guy, and you are listening to WGD, Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly with Steve and the Scum. I recommend this program highly, especially if you have nothing better to do.
Hey folks, welcome to WGD Weekly's special edition. We have an exclusive interview we wanted to share with you guys. It's come to light, Scum, over the last couple of days here on social media, that Ken Shamrock, via his Twitter feed, @ShamrockKen, has talked about making a return. He's in great shape. He's healthy and ready to unleash. That's his quote from Twitter. The full tweet says, "The WWE fans are speaking out loudly. A Ken Shamrock return. I'm in great shape, healthy, and ready to unleash." Now, I know, Scum, this has been reported on a couple of different news media outlets regarding wrestling over the last several days. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and we are going to bring it to you now, is that we have an exclusive interview with Ken Shamrock that we recorded very, very recently. We'd like to share that with you today because this content matter is very apropos to what is happening now. So we wanted to share this interview with you, and keep in mind that our crack staff of audio geniuses, whoever records this show, didn't do a very good job, and we've been debating on whether or not to even air this thing because of how bad the audio is. So keep that in mind, folks. If this is something that we didn't have a chance to go through and re-edit or do any sort of touching up to, this is raw in full, Ken Shamrock. Scum, it's been a pretty crazy week regarding the world's most dangerous man.
Absolutely, Steve. We've seen on WrestlingInc.com reported that Ken had spoken recently, and I believe Sirius Radio, Busted Open is the name of the program, Busted Open Radio, that he had touched on, and Ken had been interviewed by those folks over there. And he had mentioned the possibility of going back to the WWE. Actually, exactly what he said was, the only problem with that is I don't think Triple H wants me there, but it is what it is. It's sad because you have a big organization like that the fans would love to see me go back, love to have me in there, and yet I'm not allowed to go back there. Later on, he goes further to say, that's what I tell you about having your ear to the ground. Listen to what the fan wants before they know they want it. So Ken Shamrock recently, with Busted Open Radio, had mentioned that. But, like you mentioned, Steve, little known fact, WGD Weekly had this exclusive a couple weeks back, and due to some audio problems, we weren't able to get it on the air yet. But due to the pertinence and the relevance in the wrestling world, with the recent developments of Ken crying out to the WWE Nation across Twitter and across different forms of social media, we want to be the ones to bring you exactly what Shamrock's thoughts are, because we have it here at our fingertips. Not only does he speak with us about the WWE return, he also speaks very openly about the possibility of a return to TNA wrestling, which he was their first world champion. And he also speaks about the fact that he feels that he may have been blackballed by the wrestling industry, and he's not really sure why. So we wanted to bring you, regardless of the audio and regardless of anything else, Steve and the Scum wanted to break the news with an exclusive to the wrestling world, to the fans across the world. Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man, he wants back, he wants in WWE, he wants in TNA, and he wants some answers.
Yeah, this is fantastic stuff, and we talked about this earlier today, as a matter of fact. This was all news to us. It's news to you. It's groundbreaking, and it's very ironic that we pride ourselves, Scum, on being a podcast that talks about the glory days of professional wrestling. Now, keep in mind, folks, not often do you get the chance to talk about breaking news about classic wrestlers, and generally it's of the bad news variety. We don't have to go into further detail there, but I think we all know as wrestling fans what I'm referring to there is we generally, if we're talking about a performer from the glory days of wrestling, oftentimes there's bad news associated with it, but not in this case. This is very interesting. It's all over social media like we've talked about here. Some comments, and again, now keeping other people's privacy safe. If you want to go on to Twitter and check out some of the replies to this, it's very interesting to see the fans reaching out to Ken Shamrock. He has hundreds of replies from that tweet 99.9% of them in the positive direction, saying, definitely come back. We'd love to see you. We'd love to see you against CM Punk. We would love to see you team up with Tito Ortiz. If you're a fan of MMA, you understand there was a heated rivalry there, which Tito Ortiz, unfortunately, and Shamrock fans got the best of him, I think, in the octagon, although his time at that point, I think, had passed him, and he still went in the ring and fought valiantly against Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz, of course, being a part now of TNA, and it's very interesting to see that he could potentially be a tag team Scum with the world's most dangerous man and Tito Ortiz all in one team.
Steve, one thing that I came to mind with me, and you'll hear in the interview coming up here in just a moment, Ken also talks about his history in pro wrestling, where one point that he specifically speaks on is when he first came to the WWF, WWE, and laid out a challenge on Monday Night Raw to Mike Tyson, and that was 1997. Now imagine the money that could have been drawn in 97 with Shamrock and Tyson. Couldn't that same type money be drawn maybe at a WrestleMania or a big pay-per-view with Shamrock Lesnar? Just a thought.
Oh, my goodness.
Worlds collide from UFC. Ken Shamrock, bring him back, Brock Lesnar, and put that on the marquee. You're crossing boundaries there. Your worlds colliding, MMA and pro wrestling. Imagine the buy rate of Ken Shamrock versus Brock Lesnar.
Oh, yeah, with a proper build-up, that would be certainly a main event that I don't think very many wrestling fans would want to miss, and MMA fans for that matter. And it's ironic that we talk about guys like Brock Lesnar, guys like Tito Ortiz, Quentin Rampage Jackson, all these guys crossovers to MMA. I know Brock Lesnar spent some time in WWE prior to MMA, so he's kind of in a gray area there. But if you think about it, the crossover, and even the guy like Alberto Del Rio now using that arm breaker, MMA is spattered all over professional wrestling, whether you choose to admit it or not. There's flavor of MMA, and to have one of the original guys, Ken Shamrock, who made that crossover along with a guy like Dan Severn back in the Attitude Era, very interesting. I certainly support him. I'd love to see him back in the ring. You know Scum as well as I do. Both of us are huge fans of anybody that goes in the ring, screams and breaks limbs. So at the bottom line there is the guy's a savage. Get him in the ring, and he can certainly make things exciting. The Raw programming, the WWE programming, and the current products, I know we don't talk about a lot on the show. It's through the floor right now. As a matter of fact, this past Monday night was the worst Raw that they've recorded in years, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I don't think people are too receptive to the current storylines. To throw a guy of Ken Shamrock's magnitude back into the mix would be something spectacular. I would certainly love to see it. I would certainly start tuning in on a regular basis again to the current product. Love to see it. Scum, it's an incredible interview. You touched on a lot of the points there. The talk about Mike Tyson is second to none. You probably won't be able to find too many spots on the internet in any interview where you'll hear someone speak about Mike Tyson fighting him and feeling that confident. Not going to give it away too much. Definitely stay tuned here and listen to this interview. We're about to air it. Thanks so much for joining us on a special edition of WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We have our regular Sunday programming still on schedule. We got Tugboat, Typhoon, Fred Ottman scheduled for this coming Sunday. And, of course, the following Sunday, we got the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff. That programming is still on track. We're still going to air that on our Sunday. This is a special edition due to the current I don't know what you would want to call the escalation of interest in Ken Shamrock from his tweet the other day, and of course that interview that he did have on Sirius XM Radio. So we want to air it. A couple of things that I see here, Scum, on Ken Shamrock's Twitter feed, @ShamrockKen. A couple of funny replies, I guess I should say. It would be, how about against Tank Abbott, somebody asked, which would be interesting. Another one that's kind of funny here. Don't think that's going to happen. They don't allow people to suplex referees anymore. #PG. And Ken Shamrock replied to that. He's like, well, I'll try to suplex one just for you, brother. I think that's pretty funny. He seems to have a sense of humor about that as well. But keep in mind, folks, Ken Shamrock, a very serious individual. When he says he's in the best shape of his life, I tend to believe him. All right, Scum, like we said, we got a very special edition. So without further ado, we're going to get to this interview. Is there anything more you wanted to add before we play our interview with Ken Shamrock?
Yeah, real quick, Steve. Just a few more points that Ken touches on that you can look forward to it here in the interview. Talks about little known fact that he trained with Bret the Hitman Hart exclusively. prior to coming to the WWF for his big program with Vader back in '97. Touches on refereeing the classic I Quit match between Bret and Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13. He also goes in detail about being backstage in the locker room in Montreal at the Survivor Series, the night of the screw job, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Touches on being TNA's first ever world champion. And Steve, I'm real excited about this. You know, I've always been a Shamrock fan. I know that you are as well. World's most dangerous man. I'm about ready. The Scum is about ready to snap here, just like the Twitter feed that you just read off. I just suplexed about 4 or 5 referees. I'm ready to go. They can't pull me off the ankle lock. I'm screaming out loud. That's all I got. I can't wait to get into this interview.
No, you're absolutely right, Scum. I totally agree. So I guess we're not going to let our fans listen to our diatribe any further. Folks, thanks so much for joining us. So we're going to take you right to it now. Without further ado, our interview with Ken Shamrock. We wanted to thank Ken Shamrock. Thank you very much for joining us here at WGD Weekly with Steven the Scum. Huge name in wrestling, one of the biggest names in mixed martial arts, former WWE Tag Team and Intercontinental Champion, and a former King of the Ring. Now, it may come as a surprise to some people, if I'm not mistaken, Ken, you actually became involved in the world of wrestling before you started in MMA. Bring us back to what was the motivating factor when you started to train as a professional wrestler first. And then once you decided to go that route, tell us what you recall of your training experiences at the Buzz Sawyer Academy, and then you moved to North Carolina where you would complete your training under Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson.
Well, I'll tell you, when I first started out pro wrestling, my dad brought it to my attention. I was in the Marine Corps, and then I was kind of just bouncing around doing some jobs, bouncing jobs at some casinos and some clubs and some bodyguard work, and really just kind of no direction. And my dad mentioned something about, doing some pro wrestling, and I just finished up with college, playing college ball. And I was like, it sounds like maybe something fun, whatever. I'll go check it out. And I went down to Buzz Sawyer's school, and Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson actually were running that school at the time. And so I went and tried out. I started doing a little bit of wrestling, and immediately they saw that I had some potential to do something in pro wrestling. Being able to, carry some of the moves, being able to carry a certain character. Being able to talk on the mic, be able to hold that charisma, and then at the same time be very athletic in the ring. And so I rose very quickly. I believe in my first year I became I believe it was the North Atlantic Pro Wrestling champion. Within a year, and then I went over to pro wrestling over in Japan. I believe it was Giant Baba's organization. I went over there and did a 6-week tour over there. This was all within my first year of doing pro wrestling. And also prior to that, before I went up to see Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson, I was doing some stuff for Buzz Sawyer. But see, I never got to wrestle with Buzz. What Buzz would do was he would bring in guys. They would pay a $500 tryout fee. He would send me in there, and I would basically beat them up, and they would make them quit. And so Buzz was training me to do pro wrestling for free if I would be a shooter for him, and go in there and just work guys over and make them quit. And of course they would leave their tryout money. So I didn't get much experience on the Buzz Sawyer thing, other than some pretty good training, being able to go and beat people up, and they paid for it. So it was pretty interesting. But I got most of my experience and a lot of big time learning was when I was with Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson, and then even another step up when I went over to Japan and I worked over there for 6 weeks. I got to work with some great guys, and guys that really took me under their wing and helped me move forward. So my first start at pro wrestling was a great experience.
That's incredible stuff. Now, early on in your career, you run into a guy by the name of Dean Malenko. A lot of people know who he is, an absolute technician when it comes to mat wrestling. You worked with him as a tag team. You worked against him a little bit. You had a program there, and like you mentioned, went to Japan. Yeah, and I was wondering what your relationship was with Dean Malenko in and out of the ring. And what steered your career overseas? And if you could explain to our listeners the difference between the in-ring style that you worked in America as compared to, let's say, the Pancrase, and touch on some of your memories from overseas while you were there.
Well, it was like I said, I got to work at a couple different places overseas. My relationship with Dean Malenko has always been very professional and very, very friendly. Really a first-rate guy. His family is the very first-rate people. I met them all. And just really a good people to know and to really educate me on some of the in-ring stuff. I really learned a lot from them guys. And in fact, they were the ones that turned me on to Japanese shoot style over in Japan. That's how I actually found out the Pancrase organization, or the UWFI at the time. They are the ones that showed me the videotape of it, and that's where I started to pursue that type of in-ring fighting. There's a huge difference between what I did here in the States when it came to pro wrestling and what I did over there in Giant Baba's group. It's so much faster over there. There's not a whole lot of selling. You take a shot, you pop up, you make a face whip, and you take off, and you hit another move. And it's so fast. You don't take too long to sell. Where in the States, there's a lot of walking and talking, a lot of charismatic stuff, and really a lot of showmanship stuff. A lot of big guys too that can't do a lot of big backflip moves and stuff like that. So it's just a lot faster paced. And then even to step it up even more, the Pancrase organization over in Japan. After I worked with Giant Baba's group, later on that year, I got an opportunity to go over after Dean showed me some of these shoot tapes, go over there and actually start learning the old UWFI style, which was basically a shoot style pro wrestling. And so that was even a more faster and a harder style in that. So I had a lot of steps that I took from the American pro wrestling to Japanese pro wrestling to the Japanese shoot pro wrestling to the actual UFC hardcore fighting.
Wow, that's very interesting stuff. So then at that point, you move on to World of Mixed Martial Arts fighting, becoming one of the most iconic figures of all time in that genre. I'm sure we could spend a long time on your MMA career, and we can maybe have you back another point to get into that. But being we're a wrestling show, I'm going to move right along in your days in the ring and fast forward to February of '97. And still one of the top names in UFC, you opted to make a career move back to wrestling and sign with WWF. Just wondering how the initial groundwork toward bringing you into that company laid out, and how were you approached about joining WWF? And also, despite your early run in wrestling and even UFC, I have to venture to guess that it was a different world coming to work for the World Wrestling Federation. Were there any guys on the roster at that time who befriended you or helped you make that transition easier?
Well, going into pro wrestling, at the time, the mixed martial arts they were struggling. They were having a hard time. It seemed like, they were always in court trying to get the show to be able to happen. They're spending a lot of money on legal fees, and they just were struggling a whole lot. And then they weren't able to really pay me the money I needed to be paid to support my family. And I always told myself I could always do what I love to do just as long as I could support my family. Well, I got to a point where I couldn't do that anymore because they couldn't pay me the money I needed at that time. So I had to make a move. So I went to the owner, and I said to her, listen, I got to make a move. I really can't, support my family with what you guys want to pay me. And I completely understand where you're at. I'm not mad or complaining about it, but I do have to make a move because I can't stay with something that doesn't support my family. And Bob Myers was the president at the time, and he understood, and he gave me his blessing, and I went on to take my skills in other areas. And so I started looking over in Japan at Inoki's group, at Baba's group. I looked at WCW. I looked at the WWF. And I remember I had built a relationship with a guy named Carl DeMarco out of Canada. And I made a phone call to him because I knew he came to me when I was in the UFC, and he said, hey, you ever get an itch and want to start doing some pro wrestling, give me a call. We can do something. So I had his card. I remember I gave him a call. I said, hey, Carl, you know, I wondered if that offer's still out there, maybe see if there's something we could do in pro wrestling. And so he quickly made some phone calls and made an introduction with me and Vince. And we sat down. We talked about the things. I went on their Monday Night Raw show, did a stint with Farouk and the Nation, and we started talking contract. And as soon as I started working with those guys, I felt comfortable. Like, okay, I think this is where I want to go, because I know WCW made some interest towards me and over in Japan. And I just at the time I felt like, you know, these guys are really making an effort, a real good effort to do something with me, and I feel comfortable with them, so I'm going to move forward with them. And so we sat down, you know, put together a contract, a 3-year deal, and off to the races I went. And it was real interesting because the minute I hit the ring, I went down to Canada, in Calgary, and I worked with Bret Hart. I knew I was going to wrestle Big Van Vader in my actual first pro wrestling match. And so I went down there with Bret and worked with him, and got to meet Stu and Owen and all of those guys down there. Just great people. And I learned a whole lot on going into my match with Vader, on what to expect, you know, what I need to look out for, different things strategically in order to put my skills together to have a match with him. And so Bret helped me out quite a bit in my first match, and I learned a lot from him. So, yeah, it was really a good experience for me. And it was a good thing I went to Calgary and stayed up there and learned from him for a little while, because it really paid off when I had my match with Vader, because I thought for my first time out, he hit a home run.
Sure. What a great way to learn from Bret Hart out in Calgary. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, right?
No, it doesn't.
All right. Well, hey, before we move along here in your WWF career, I wanted to touch on something that was brought up early on when you showed up in WWF on camera by yourself on Raw when you were at the commentary table. If you remember, you put the headset on. It was around the time that ABC had referred to you as the world's most dangerous man, ABC News. And one of the first things you brought up on camera was to lay a challenge out to Mike Tyson. And I admit, I remember back at that, I always wanted to know, and you could probably be one of the few who could tell me about it, was it planned for you to make that challenge as though at one point WWF was planning to bring Tyson in to face you in what definitely would have been a record-breaking, you know, numbers-wise bout? If it was part of the game plan, what were the factors that played into Shamrock Tyson showdown not happening?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all. I know I was approached about challenging, and they asked if I was interested in that, and you know, I said, yeah, I am, very much so. And so, you know, I thought the match was going to be for me. You know, that we were going to do that, and I really made that challenge. And the next thing I know, everything was being, you know, kind of going in a different direction. So, but you know, there was nothing really I could do. You know, there's really, I mean, I was just grateful to be there and be able to do something with them. So when they started steering that away in another direction, I kind of figured it out immediately that, you know, my game was up. So I think I was the guy they needed to get Tyson and the inch of heat to bring him in. And we did that. I did that. I did my job. And then, of course, after that, you've seen the tremendous matches that were put on with Mike Tyson being involved. I thought it was, you know, very cleverly put together. So, yeah, I'm not sure it would have been a good deal for Mike to even get in the ring with me, because I think it would have killed him immediately. So, the way they did go with it, I thought was clever, and I thought it was smart. So,
real quick to follow up on that, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but just wondering, how do you think that would have played out, you and Tyson?
Oh, you know, without a doubt. I mean, I think it's pretty proven over and over again. You know, Mike Tyson's one of the best ever when it comes to power punching and boxing and knocking opponents out. highest percentage of knockouts, in the history of boxing. He's just incredibly strong, quick, tremendously gifted, but that's in boxing. You're talking about a fight where anything goes. It's just not his thing, and he'd be like a baby once he hits the ground. It would be over. And it's not that hard to get somebody to take them down to the ground when all they know is to punch, because you get low enough and shoot a low single, and boom, they're on the ground. It's over. So, and Mike knows that too. Mike knows that too. He'd never get in a ring with me. He knows that, and he's even said that. There's no way he'd get in a ring with me. He told me that to my face.
Yeah, that's some incredible stuff. When you can have somebody of the caliber of Mike Tyson tell you, yeah, I'm good. That's kind of saying a lot there for you.
For sure.
We'll move on. When you come to the WWE, so, regardless of the plans possibly with Mike Tyson and all the hype that you had when you first came in, after you make your debut, you wind up under the bright lights of WrestleMania, where you're brought in as a guest referee for that classic Bret Hart, Steve Austin, I Quit match. So what was it like to return to pro wrestling after a very long time away? And when you return, you walk right back into the biggest event in the most well-known wrestling company in the world as a referee in a match that many say went down as one of the all-time classics. Bring us through your thoughts on that match between Bret Hart and Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13.
Well, I think that Vince was definitely in a situation where he needed big time for, but, I think that if you look at pro wrestling before Ken Shamrock and after Ken Shamrock, when I came in and ref that match, Vince knew what he was doing. He needed a cutting edge. He needed something to change things around because WCW was taking all their guys. And Vince needed to go do something different. And so he went completely towards the edge, as far left as he could go without it being rated R, with brutality and with the way that people were talking and the fear and everything. And when he brought me in, he had a thought in his mind and a vision. And to me, it was genius. He brought me in with an I Quit match with two guys who knew how to be badasses. Two guys that knew how to work the ring and knew how to do holds and knew how to just truly beat the crap out of each other without actually hurting one another. When I was involved in that match, I literally thought that I was in a fight. I was in there refereeing it, and I literally thought those two guys would beat the hell out of each other. And I tell you, listening to the crowd, being a part of something like that, it changed the face of wrestling. Wrestling now, if you look at it now, before that and after that, there are so many submission holds. There are so many I Quit type moves that will make people tap out. That before there was a rear naked hold, there was a sharpshooter, a few guys that did those things, but most of it was just real slow stuff. Now it's like arm bars, leg locks, you name it. These guys are doing it, and it changed the game of wrestling. Those two guys, when they went into that I Quit match with me as the referee, turned wrestling around.
Sure. I wouldn't argue with you there. That's certainly one of my all-time favorites, too. So hearing you look back at that Bret Austin match, so I couldn't help remembering after you came in and had the feud with Vader you spoke of earlier, you worked with some of the members of the Hart Foundation, working with the British Bulldog and then Bret as well. That being said, I'm sure it's safe to say that both in the ring and on some level outside of the ring, you had some type of relationship with those guys. Shortly after you feuded with them on screen, one of the most talked about controversial nights in wrestling ever happened at the Survivor Series 97 in Montreal. Everyone's heard that story and heard Bret's take and Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon's take, so we don't really need to get back into that. But I was wondering if someone in the locker room that night that had worked with everyone there pretty extensively, what were your initial thoughts or emotions and the reaction, if you can remember any specifically, of the guys in the locker room that night in Montreal when they watched and saw how the Hart-Michaels match played out?
I think a lot of people were kind of just waiting for the gig, waiting for the gig to come up. You know, like, okay, what's the new angle? What's the angle? What's the angle? It was just surreal for people who were in this business to not really think that this wasn't something that was planned. But it wasn't. It was literally a screw job. And personally, in my opinion, any time that you give yourself, or anybody, whether it's an owner or a person that's actually working, any time that you have trust amongst each other, that trust cannot be broken, or otherwise it's not professional anymore. And I think there was a lot of mistrust that was done there, and it wasn't in a professional organization like that. At that level, you just don't ever want to see that happen. And because now all the other people that are involved are like, you know, thinking to themselves, that could be me. That could be me, but in more of a dangerous situation where something could actually go wrong and kill me. Because I'm trusting someone to make sure that they take care of me, and that I trusted someone to take care of my character and take care of my body and take care of my well-being. And I'm putting all my faith in that. And so a lot of stuff went wrong after that. You know, people got hurt. You know, some people even died. And you just wonder where it ends, where it begins.
It's incredible when you look back and see the mayhem that happened that night. And like you said, having that professional level of truth is everything. Now, we move on a little bit to a feud that you worked with Shawn Michaels after Bret Hart had left for different territory, went down to WCW. You had fought Bret Hart when he was the champion, and then after Survivor Series, there was word that you were next in line to face Shawn Michaels after he became the champion. And, of course, you had a battle with him at that DX In Your House pay-per-view. When you were facing him, was there ever a point where there was a discussion that maybe they were going to give you the WWF Championship? And I was wondering, was it ever discussed for you to ever become the champion at any point in your career?
Well, I know this, that they moved me along pretty fast, and I really thought that I had done everything that I needed to do to be able to get a legitimate program and being able to work towards the title. And it just never came. It never happened for whatever reason. To this day, I still don't know what the reasons were why I never got the shot. I thought I did everything I needed to do, and it just never came around. And so it was pretty discouraging. You know, in everything I've ever done professionally, I've always reached that championship level. I've been in probably 3 or 4 different organizations, even the TNA, where I became the first heavyweight champion there. In all my careers and companies that I've fought in, I've always risen and been the world champion. And then to not have the opportunity after I thought that I did everything I needed to get the shot and be able to do a program, and then not have those opportunities. But it is what it is. You know, there's not much that I could do about it. You know, it's pro wrestling, and it is what it is. And you know, hopefully, like I said, someday I'll get that opportunity. You know, I'm still pretty young and still looking for the opportunity to go back and do something there if that chance ever comes around. But right now, it don't look like that's going to happen, because there's certain people that don't want to see me back in there.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet it's the ankles of a lot of these young guys, considering that you came up with that ankle lock submission hold. And prior to your doing that, having that tap out as opposed to a verbal submission is something that nobody had ever seen before, and it still happens in today's product. Where did you come up with the idea for using that type of ankle lock in your matches? And what do you think of the fact that other guys like Kurt Angle and Jack Swagger, just to name a few, have developed that same move? And would you agree that your background played into this more realistic feel at the time of the in-ring product back in the Attitude Era?
Well, you know, it's definitely my coming into pro wrestling has definitely changed on the look of pro wrestling now when it comes to tap outs. and how people approach submissions, and even the fans being educated on the submissions through, MMA, that they know that these things are very dangerous and they hurt. So when these people actually do these holds, they know that, hey, these guys are, he could break his leg if he wanted to. They know that realism is there. And so it did change when I came in. It did change the look of pro wrestling. It did change the way people go after submission holds and the legitimacy of submission holds. The fans know how real they are. And when I did those submission holds, those are all submission holds that I have actually tapped people out with a rolling ankle lock and end up into the toe. Being able to go across the body on top and lock that ankle lock and be able to roll through and come up with it. I did so many moves in that pro wrestling that I have actually attempted and actually finished in a real life fight. That it really has. It really has changed the look on how the fans look at the submissions and how the actual pro wrestlers approach those submissions.
Yeah, it's good to see someone with that MMA background bring that type of move set into pro wrestling. It certainly was overdue, I think, at the time. We move from there over into the year of 1998. You have a program with a man that would go on to achieve a ton of success in and out of the ring on the big screen, and that's The Rock. You battle for several months with him over the Intercontinental title. And later that year, you have a fantastic series that saw you work with the late, great Owen Hart. You had the match in the Octagon at SummerSlam, and a real unique match where you're actually squared off in the legendary dungeon up in Calgary. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on both of those competitors and what your feelings were with your matches and your relationship with The Rock and, of course, the great Owen Hart.
Well, working with The Rock was probably where I've got real seasons with actually working a program with a certain individual. And working with The Rock was real easy because we both give and take, and just being smooth in the ring with somebody and working with them for a long time, knowing what their tendencies are. We put together some real great matches, and I thought we pulled them off really well. I ended up with the Intercontinental title at the end of that program, and of course then The Rock went on to a challenge for the title after I had taken the Intercontinental title from him. So then I thought I was next in line for the shot. I thought they were working a program with Rock being the champion, and me actually challenging The Rock for that title after I had a few programs with the Intercontinental title. That never came about. I went on to do some matches that will probably never be done again, with Owen Hart in the dungeon match, with the Lion's Den match with the weapons that I did with Blackman, and I did with several others. Even Vince jumped in on that action where we had the cage in there. And a straight jacket match with Jeff Jarrett where I actually submitted him with the straight jacket on. So it was, I was very, very fortunate to be able to do a lot of things that have only been done up to this date by me, and fortunate to be able to have some part of being able to change the pro wrestling and move it forward into the next generation of the 2000s to 2020. The way that the people are looking at submissions and how real they are, and different certain matches with the dungeon and the straitjacket, and being able to work the program with The Rock. I just really was fortunate to be involved in a lot of those game-changing type situations. Again, I revert back to this. I just wish that I had the opportunity to be able to work a program for that title.
Sure. All right, well, moving on from those classic feuds, wanted to touch on another man that you must have a pretty good relationship with, moving into 1999. That would be Vince McMahon. You just brought him up briefly. It seemed whether it was angle where you had joined the corporation, or there was another time, I remember when you found his daughter when she'd been abducted by The Undertaker on Raw. Seemed for a while there you were involved on screen with him an awful lot. I just wanted to ask, as someone who must have dealt with Vince on the business side of things, at least somewhat, too, what were your thoughts on him and his on-screen role as the evil Mr. McMahon character, being that you had to have at least talk contract and stuff with him? What similarities were there, if any, between the on-air character that we all saw and the Vince that you knew and worked with on the business side?
Well, for sure. He's, strictly a businessman. He's good at what he does. And as long as we're all working for the same program and we're all making money for the program, everybody's happy. The minute that doesn't happen, there's just basically, there's no place for you. And it's easily turned on with the excitement of you being there and being friendly to you. It's as easily turned on as it is when you're not doing anything. It's that easy to turn it off. And nothing against that. There's so many people that he deals with and so many different personalities that, business comes first. And, his whole world wraps around people that are involved in his business that are making money for him. And if you're not doing that, then you're not involved in his world.
Just a couple more questions here for you, Ken. We really appreciate your time and joining us here this week. Bring me to your time in TNA wrestling, the first pay-per-view there that they did. You were a big part of. You won the gauntlet for the gold match and became the NWA champion, or the NWA TNA champion, as they were calling it. As a fan watching, I thought for that company just started, it was a perfect fit for you, and you could be the face of that company. Turned out that your stay there didn't last super long, so I guess what I was hoping you could shed light on is, first, how do you wind up in TNA for that inaugural Battle Royal match, and who approaches you with the idea of becoming their champion? Then, if you don't mind telling us, why was your stay in that company not so long and seemingly cut somewhat short?
Well, when I was first approached, I was approached by Jeff Jarrett, because of the success it was having in the UFC and MMA world. They wanted to try and bring that edge over to their organization, too. Totally nonstop action. They wanted to put some edge on it. And so they brought me in there, and then I believe it was Senior actually thought it would be a great idea for me to carry the strap. And so I obviously got the strap, and they hung the strap on me. The problem we ran into was that because I was training for fights and I was continuously, in training, it was difficult for me to make, all the shows. And so that was the downfall for me in TNA, was I just wasn't available to them. Like I should have been. But I just, like at the time I was in the middle of trying to come back from going away from the MMA and into pro wrestling, and then back into MMA again. I was trying to reestablish myself in the MMA world, and so to try and split that time, traveling all the way up to Nashville to shoot the show, it was hard for me, and I couldn't make all the events they needed. So it was hard for them, too, because I really thought it was a great fit, and we could have done a lot of things. Unfortunately, it was just bad timing.
All right, Ken, I was just wondering, at this point, it's been a few years since you've been involved in any of the major companies here. Would you ever be open to, I'm sure you still keep yourself in pretty good shape. I know that you're active in training people and such. Would you ever be open to a return to either WWE or TNA?
I am very open to that. In fact, I've pretty much been begging for someone to give me an explanation of why I'm not being considered to at least be a part of the Hall of Fame party or get invited to some of the events that are going on. I've been pretty much just like blackballed, and I don't know why. I don't think I have any enemies other than probably Hunter, who, I didn't think we didn't get along, but I know we rubbed shoulders a few times the wrong way. But I think that maybe there's some jealousy. I don't know. But I've been asking someone to please let me know what's going on, because I would really love to come back and be able to get that shot at the title. And TNA, I was a short time I was there. I didn't have the time I needed to spend to work there. Now I have that time. I'm in great shape. I'm probably in better shape than I've been even then, because now all I do is basically lift weights to do a lot of cardio. So I'm, in real good shape. I don't have to worry about keeping my size down for fighting, because I'm not fighting. So, yeah, I'm pretty much open to being able to get back into pro wrestling. I just need someone to give me an opportunity, and right now I'm not getting any feedback from anybody.
Well, I can tell you both of us, myself and Steve, would definitely enjoy seeing you show up on Raw or Impact. Well, I mean, I would think TNA, being you were their first champion, that would be a heck of a good fit to make a comeback.
Yeah, I would love to. I just haven't had anybody really reach out. So, but yeah, no, that's just it. I'm done fighting pretty much, and I'm looking to get back into pro wrestling and do some stuff there.
Well, that would be great. We certainly wish you the best in those efforts. Maybe this interview, maybe get the word out there for you. Maybe hit the right ears, and maybe you'll be on your way, I hope.
That would be great, man. I appreciate it, because like I said, I'm open.
Yeah, well, any way we could help you, we'd be happy to.
Listen, man,
okay.
I appreciate you guys getting the word out for me.
Thanks a lot, Ken. Appreciate it.
Yeah, bye.
There you have it, folks. Ken Shamrock exclusive interview. We recorded this very recently. Thanks so much for listening into our special edition. Again, we couldn't go any further with our programming and not give you guys what you would want to hear. And, of course, that's the current events on Classic Wrestler. So we're really, really happy to have been able to play that interview for you guys in full. Sorry once again about the audio. Wasn't the best. Keep in mind, if you listen to the rest of our shows at WGD Weekly on YouTube or on iTunes, you'll see that the quality is much better. So thanks again for bearing with us there. Scum, what an incredible interview.
Absolutely, Steve. I say bring the guy back. Ken Shamrock, always an animal, always entertaining, always believable. Like we said in the intro, you could bring Shamrock back, have him fight Lesnar. You could bring him into TNA. You got the history there. Like he just said in the interview, he was their first world champion. He didn't really have the time to put in. His schedule is free. He's in great shape. He's not fighting anymore, so he wants back in the ring. Why not bring Ken Shamrock back in some capacity?
I totally agree. I mean, he certainly is going to bring that electricity to the audience. I know it's a lot of a different, the programming is 100% different now as regarding the PG and everything, but Ken Shamrock, what he brought was a sense of realism more than it was overall violence, and that heavy R-rated type of stuff that you saw in the Attitude Era. Of all the people from that era, Ken Shamrock was one that really brought a sense of legitimacy to the whole thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Steve, like you touched on when he mentioned it in the interview earlier, which I got a chuckle out of. Not many people circa 1997 that are confident and would say that the man would look him in the face and say the same when they said that Iron Mike Tyson, he would treat like a baby.
That's probably one of our more infamous quotes now that I'm glad that everybody had a chance to hear this. And Scum, I know we talked about this a little bit in the intro of our show. This is a show that you and I personally as hosts of this show and the guys that put this together were like, man, what great content, but the audio quality, it's just, what are we going to do here? How are we going to release this to a public? How are we going to release this to folks that listen to our show and can grasp onto the great content that's in here, but the audio, oh my goodness. So I'm very, very happy to have had this outlet to get this out to everybody. It's a really incredible interview. I'm so glad to have been a part of it, along with yourself, Scum. Another great interview, and if you think about it, Ken Shamrock, yet another guy that's been on our show, guys like Brian Clark, who's, again, he used almost the same verbiage. I'm in the prime of my career, I'm in great physical condition. I can easily re-enter the Royal Rumble. Another couple of guys that are still in the prime of their careers. I keep saying the prime of their careers, but I just mean that they can perform. And if you look at the higher end of age on some of the performers are still around, like Hulk Hogan and those guys are in their 60s. So if you're a 40-year-old man and you're still in great condition, you are easily able to go out and perform on a nightly basis at any wrestling federation, including WWE or TNA. So it's very interesting to see yet another guy, Ken Shamrock, to join the ranks of guys like Buff Bagwell, just incredible, Brian Clark, that could still bring it into the ring and put on a great performance and be a recognizable face that a lot of guys like you and me, Scum, that have been watching for years can kind of relate to and really kind of support. So I hope Ken Shamrock gets an opportunity. It seems as though you know, the WWE, you just never know. Who'd have thought a year and a half, 2 years ago that Bruno Sammartino would be in the Hall of Fame, and yet here he is. So, you know, the world of professional wrestling, everything could be a work. You just never know. We're fans just like you guys and just kind of broadcasting our opinions along with what you hear in fact from the horse's mouth, so to speak, with Ken Shamrock. It's been a great interview. I'm really happy that we had that opportunity, Scum, and I wish him the best, and I certainly hope to see him on a Monday night program here very soon.
Absolutely, a Monday, a Thursday, a Friday, any night. I mean, Ken Shamrock, when he says, you think about the conditioning and the training and the different genres of fighting that he's been involved with. When Ken Shamrock says, I'm doing nothing but lifting weights and cardio, so you know I'm in great shape. I'm probably in better shape than when I was TNA's world champion, and I believe that was back in 2002 that TNA first came around, possibly 2003. I'm not exactly sure on the date there. But when he says that, this is a man that has been in fantastic shape, fighting shape for his entire life. So when he says that, he's not saying that and coming to the table half in. He's all in. It's Ken Shamrock. Just like you were saying, some of these other guys that are in fantastic shape, they all look good. We've seen or we've talked to each of those people that you mentioned, Bagwell, Credible, Clark. Those guys are all in fantastic shape. To some degree, though, even more so with his background, Ken Shamrock, and just in the outcry from the fans and his followers on Twitter over the last 24 hours, with the comments that he's made, it's hard to disagree with him when he says that the WWE Nation is speaking, and they're speaking loud to get Ken Shamrock back. I mean, the history is there. Like we said, if it was TNA, he was their first world champion, gauntlet for the gold. No, how can you have more history than that, bringing him back on TNA programming? Again, I know that they're off to train for their big upcoming fight with one another, but Tito Ortiz and Shamrock have always been known enemies in the world of MMA. Rampage Jackson is there. I mean, any of those guys with Shamrock would make sense in a program, or Shamrock with whoever would be the champion. I know that Bully Ray is scheduled to face AJ Styles coming up at Bound for Glory. Either one of those guys in a match with Shamrock, I would think, would be a no-brainer, being that he was the first champion. And if he were to come to WWE, the possibilities are endless. Like we said earlier, how huge would a Lesnar match be? How huge would Shamrock and even John Cena or CM Punk or any of those guys that are there? How about, have him come out and attack Swagger for stealing his move? Kurt Angle's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for TNA at Bound for Glory. How about Shamrock showing up and staking claim to the move that Angle stole from him during the ceremony?
Those are fantastic angles and certainly interesting and compelling wrestling television. And you know what's kind of funny, Scum, is we touch base on this a lot. It's been a running inside joke. I'll share with the fans a little bit. If you hadn't heard our shows in the past, myself and the Scum go way back, and at one point in time, we would always watch Royal Rumbles and try not to know who the roster was, and we would wait and see who the next guy coming through the curtain, and always get a good, no way, this guy's crazy coming out. How great would it be, 2014 Royal Rumble, and just like they did last year, I think they did it twice last year, and both entrants were great, was Goldust and Chris Jericho both made returns in the Royal Rumble this past year. How great would it be to see a guy like Ken Shamrock part the curtain and come out and just go nuts on everybody in the ring in the Royal Rumble?
Absolutely. Throwing those suplexes around like he used to do, screaming, pounding the fist to his own face. The place would go nuts. And that thumping theme music that he used to come out to in the Attitude Era. I mean, he's been dropping between that busted open radio interview and even on Twitter. He's been calling for Triple H. How about a program with Triple H and Shamrock? I mean, again, the possibilities there are absolutely endless with him coming back. Like you just heard, not only the history from TNA, not only history with some of the guys he had back in WWE, this is a guy who went from the top of the UFC world. He came in, you just heard it out of his own mouth. He went in, he took the time when he was coming into WWF to be a superstar, and he wanted to knock it out of the park, his own words, against Vader in that first program. He goes to Calgary and trains with Bret Hart, Stu, Owen, to come in. This is a superstar, a worldwide superstar in UFC. He goes and puts that time in so he can come in and knock it out of the park when he comes to the WWF. He goes through his career. He has great programs like we touched on, with The Rock, with Owen Hart, with Vince McMahon, with The Undertaker. Everybody, anybody who was anyone in the Attitude Era, Shamrock had a cup of coffee with. So he comes in. If you think that he wouldn't come back in a return and knock it out of the park like he did then, you're nuts. The fans would love it. He would be all in. It would be exciting. Like you said, Steve, add that element of realism that is missing with your PG era Monday Night Raw or Impact. Any of the shows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what, something else he mentioned early on, Scum, and this was very interesting to me. We interviewed Larry Zbyszko not too long ago, and he mentioned this briefly, too, is that, you know, the industry of professional wrestling was a big secret. He used the word Illuminati, you know, referring to the Da Vinci Code and keeping everything a big hush-hush secret. And that still had its... you know, the blueprint was still there when Ken Shamrock was cutting his teeth into the industry as well. And he signs up to be the shooter for Sawyer's wrestling school. And folks, if you don't know what a shooter is, basically what he is a guy that doesn't look so imposing that you would be afraid to fight him, but as someone that expressed interest in trying to be a pro wrestler would go to a gym and say, hey, I'm a big guy, I want to be a pro wrestler. And they would say, oh, okay, well, great, we'll give you a tryout. Hop in the ring with this guy. And that guy, of course, they'd label a shooter who was a really good fighter and would stretch you out, break a limb, maybe cut you up a little bit, hurt you, and basically test your mettle to see if you're even worth training. Now, think about that now. Before he had his, you know, his fame as an MMA fighter, and long before he had his fame as a WWE superstar, he was Buzz Sawyer's shooter. Definitely not a guy I would want to get in the ring and test my mettle with to see if I wanted to try out for wrestling school.
Absolutely not. Hey, Buzz, here's my $500. I'm ready for my training. Yeah, go ahead. Here you go. Go see that guy in the ring, a short guy with the spiked hair. And then Shamrock eats him for dinner. Just breaks somebody's arm and sends him packing. In the meantime, Sawyer's over there in a tuxedo, driving off in a Cadillac.
I'm sorry, no refunds. No refunds here, folks. Totally unbelievable. And you know, he has an outpouring of support here. You can see it blatantly on Twitter. Hashtag Scum Nation. Let's get your opinion, folks. Give us a shout on Twitter at WGD Weekly. Definitely stop by our Facebook page and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Give us your opinion on what you think, where you think Ken Shamrock should go. Should it be TNA to face some of the old MMA legends that are there? Should he go to a bigger stage at WWE and relive some of those moments from the Attitude Era? Certainly a point of debate for wrestling fans, so we'd love to hear your opinions on that. Thanks again so much for joining us for a special edition of WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. It's been an incredible 45 minutes or so here. Real happy to have you. New listeners, guys, I know this may come from a different outlet today, so we wanted to thank anybody that's never heard our show before for tuning in and listening to us. That's fantastic. Definitely hit the subscribe button on YouTube. We're going to give you a show every Sunday if you haven't been with us already. We got guys like Larry Zbyszko we talked about, of course, the total package, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, just incredible. The list goes on and on of the guests that we already have. And, of course, we got many more coming up. Scum, we touched on it a little bit earlier. This coming Sunday, just a couple days away now, we got Tugboat, Fred Ottman. Hilarious interview. That guy was really funny, very genuine. We talk about a little bit of what's going on in the current product. Having marital, I think he's related to the Rhodes family by marriage, which is pretty cool. So very pertinent information, again, for those folks that still watch the current product with the Rhodes family. Probably the most compelling storyline in WWE. And Scum, I wanted to touch on that real quick. I know you kind of, right now it's with the way we do our show, we're very busy trying to get new guests and get shows put together. I have about time for one show a week, and that's Raw. And I know you kind of focus a little bit more on the TNA product. So I will tell you this, that my interest in Raw is at an all-time low. The ratings suck. The storylines suck. And this is a guy that's extremely patient. I've been watching WWE programming since the early 80s along with you, Scum, and I could pretty much tolerate anything, high or low point. when it comes to the wrestling program, understanding that, maybe the next week will be better, but it continuously is getting worse. Ken Shamrock would be a catalyst to get people to start watching the program again. There's no way to not look at it like that. And I certainly hope that one of those outlets, whether it be WWE or TNA, gives this man a shot, because we've said this over and over now. The guy is still in extremely good shape. He's already trained. He knows the industry. And I personally would rather watch him than a guy, and no disrespect to these young guys. I have nothing bad to say about them. But as far as just a general statement, my personal interest, I would much rather see a guy that I can relate to from watching wrestling in the past to come and make a re-debut, so to speak, and be part of the current product. A lot like Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho spent a lot of time off and on the shows. He's been around, and every time he comes back, he gets a huge interest. He gets a huge pop. Everybody's interested to see what he does, and then he just kind of drifts off into obscurity because of the way the storylines are written now. It's a corporate world out there, folks. It's a money-driven society. It is what it is. I think Ken Shamrock would, when at the bottom line, being a money-driven industry, do you want people to buy tickets and watch your pay-per-views? Get a guy like Ken Shamrock back on your program and watch the ratings go up.
Yeah, sure. He flat out said in the interview repeatedly that he always was a little bit disappointed that he never reached the top of WWE as their world champion. He said that everywhere he went, he has strived and achieved in becoming world champion, even in TNA. And it was a different day and age when he was there, about 11 years ago. But any of those companies that you brought him back, when you said, to the listeners, give some feedback to us on where you would like to see Shamrock. Would you like to see him in the WWE, TNA? What about Ring of Honor? A product that I've been watching recently. I know in the not too distant past they just finished up with their World Championship tournament, and there's one that he never reached the top of. Ken Shamrock, Ring of Honor prides themselves on that hard-hitting wrestling tradition. Ken Shamrock, who's more hard-hitting than Ken Shamrock in there? Who's more real and more believable than Ken Shamrock in there? So get back to us, like Steve said, on Twitter, on Facebook, however you'd like to. We'd love to hear your feedback. Would you like to see Shamrock in WWE and TNA and Ring of Honor? Is there a particular opponent you'd like to see him against? Lesnar comes to mind, like we said. Triple H would be an obvious one with the different comments that have been thrown around by Ken recently. How about Kurt Angle? What a great match if he's going to come back after the Bound for Glory and the Hall of Fame thing. Kurt Angle and Ken Shamrock, to my knowledge, have never been in the ring together. I think that would be a huge match. Like we said, AJ Styles and Shamrock. There's plenty of different outlets out there, so let us know what you think. We would be excited to hear your feedback, and we want to know what the fans have to say about this. Bring back Ken Shamrock. I know Steve's on board with it. I'm certainly on board with it, so let's hear what you have to say about it, people.
Absolutely right. That's, once again, hashtag Scum Nation. We'll be checking that hashtag on Facebook and Twitter. Give us a follow, search, and you can see it on your screen here if you're watching us on YouTube right now. You'll see all the different outlets. You very simply put a search for WGD Weekly in on those outlets, and you will find us: iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We're all over the place. Thanks once again for joining us at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Very special, what would you call it, a special news bulletin, so to speak, with a full-length interview from Ken Shamrock. Very pertinent, very time-sensitive, so we wanted to get that out to you as soon as possible. Once again, thank you very much for bearing with us through some audio difficulties. We'll make sure that in the future we bring you a quality product. I know this coming Sunday that the interview and the audio from Fred Ottman is 100% clear, and we wanted to thank you once again for listening to our program. Hashtag Scum Nation all over the internet, folks. Thanks once again for joining us. I'm Steve. Scum, you got anything to add, my friend?
Absolutely, Steve. We want to thank everyone for tuning in here. We want to thank Ken Shamrock for breaking the exclusive news, his interest with TNA, as well as his views on many other things with us here at WGD Weekly. We want to thank any new listeners that found us through a different outlet here today to listen to the show, we welcome you back. Like Steve said, this Sunday will be Fred Ottman, the Tugboat Typhoon. Next week we have Ivan Koloff, the Russian Bear. We've had plenty of shows in the past that you can find at WGD Weekly on YouTube, on iTunes, including some of the great names Steve mentioned, Larry Zbyszko, Lex Luger, Jim Cornette, Buff Bagwell, Paul Ellering. The list goes on and on with the guys that we've had on the program. And you can find us, like Steve said, hashtag Scum Nation. We are all over the place. If you can't find us, you're not looking hard enough. And like I always say, Steve, and it's kind of included you a lot lately, it seems like, just with the momentum that we've been building, not only is it the Scum, but it's also yourself, my longtime tag team partner, and WGD Weekly is a show that seems to be the latest sensation sweeping the wrestling radio nation, baby.
That's right, folks. Hop on the Scum wagon while you still can. Wanted to thank you once again for joining us at WGD Weekly Special Edition with Ken Shamrock. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on Sunday.
See you on Sunday, everybody.